Laura, as I've shared with you, God has just used the story of your family and just the courage of your heart to tell it through Fly a Little Higher in just a really unique way in my family's life. The book was given to me from a friend as a gift, and before I could ever open it, my husband grabbed it and started reading it, and he literally could not stop. He read it on the plane, he read it in the car, he read it at the hotel. We were heading to an event of mine, and he kept me up late at night when I was supposed to be sleeping and getting ready for the conference the next day because he just was so captivated by the amazing story. Zach's story, your story, and God's story in the beautiful way that you told it. So tell us a little bit about Zach.
Yeah, so Zach was he was a fun kid. There are 6 of us in our family, and he was the extrovert in our family. He was the one that was always up for some crazy thing, and if there was an opportunity, he would take it. He was just really fun to be with, and even from a really young age, he was just a really empathetic kid. Just had a big heart from a really small age, or from when he was really small. But other than that, he was a pretty average kid, and I think that's an important thing for people to know, especially having seen news things about him and the various things that are out there, that he was a great kid, but he was a really average kid too. Struggled with the same things that other kids do. But I think what was extraordinary about him was that he was so empathetic and did a really big heart.
Yeah, I noticed.
Yeah, so Zach was big into sports. So in our family, he was our sports kid, and he was a basketball player. He just finished up at his grade school, St. Croix Catholic, and he was headed into the public school system, and he was getting ready to try out for the basketball team. He was gearing up for that, and he went for a run with his sister, came home. This was late August of 2009, so 5 years ago. Came home, and his hip was hurting, his left hip. We went for an MRI after 2.5 months of physical therapy because we didn't find anything on an x-ray that could be wrong. After 2.5 months, we found out by an MRI that he actually had a tumor. And the anniversary of finding that out was 5 years ago in November. So November's kind of a hard month for us. We found out through a biopsy then at the University of Minnesota that he had a rare bone cancer called osteosarcoma. It's not genetic. It's just this really bizarre disease, and they're trying to figure it out. After he was diagnosed, he had a 70% chance of surviving. That's what they told us. And so we started in with chemotherapy, and, your life just changes so much when something like that happens. It's like your life is a chessboard, and when something like cancer comes in, it's like a bully comes in the room and flips that board off the table. All of your pieces are scattered, and you just scramble to try to figure out how to put them back on that board. And so 5 years ago, that's what we were doing, is trying to figure life out. And we were doing pretty well, and then Zach had the tumor removed. The chemotherapy was working. We were really excited because we didn't see the doctors didn't find any other signs of cancer in his body anywhere. It likes to go to the lungs too, so there were no signs of it there. The tumor was taken out after 3 months of chemotherapy. The tumor was dead. That meant the chemotherapy was working. We went on with 5 more months of chemotherapy. And 5 days after we finished up, we found lesions in his lungs. And that's how our lives were for 2.5 years after that. Until March of 2012, we took our family to Europe. And that's when I noticed he was limping a lot more. His leg was hurting again. His hip was hurting. We got home about a month later, did a PET scan, and found out that he was full of cancer. And that's when he was given a year to live. And then that's when our lives changed again. Big things happened.
Yeah. So much of the book and the story, and really how the world found out about Zach's story was really through his song. So I wanted to talk about his song, and that's really where the title of the book and everything. Now, the song is called Clouds, but I wanted to ask you, first of all, why did he want to write a song? And of course, we find that out in the book, but for those who haven't read the book, why did he want to write a song?
His first love was sports, but his second love was music, which I'm so grateful for, that he had been taking guitar lessons. And as his illness progressed and he was able to do less and less, he really did turn to music. And so after we found out that he was terminal, I started to think of ways that he could say the big stuff that needs to be said, but that sometimes can be really awkward, especially for a teenager, because there were things that he wanted to say, but the people on the receiving end weren't necessarily ready to hear it. So I started to think about other families that I'd heard who their loved one had written letters. And so I presented that as an option for him, that he might want to think about writing some letters to say those big things. And he liked the idea. But he was having a really hard time using that medium to tell what he wanted to tell. So he kind of put it on the back burner. And a couple months after I'd asked him to write the letters, I was downstairs. One of Zach's big faults was that he was an enormous slob. He was a pack rat to the nth degree. I don't know why he kept thinking he did, but he did. And the basement started to smell like goats who'd eaten tacos and needed to be dealt with. So I went downstairs and I was cleaning up around his roost, which was the only clean spot on the couch. And I was going through some papers, and then I opened up a crumpled up piece of paper, and I read through it, and it was the lyrics to his song Clouds. And it was very obvious to me that this was how he was going to do it. This is how he was going to say goodbye. He needed that poetry of songwriting. And it was definitely his goodbye to our family and his friends. And
why do you think Clouds resonated with so many people around the world and continues to?
And it's a heartbreaking song, especially knowing him and knowing what he was going through. But it's also a very hopeful song. And I think that's what happened to the world, is they heard this heartbreaking song that brought them hope. And that's how life is. You know, that's how it is so often. And it was really interesting for us as a family to be sort of in the middle of hearing the feedback from people who'd heard the song and saw the video. It was all demographics. It was all different. You know, it was little kids to grown men who'd been soldiers that were responding to this in a big way. I mean, it was very obvious to us that this was more than a response to a song. This was a response because of grace. And I had this visual in my mind as we continued to hear from people over the months of this song sort of being like a little grace magic carpet that was sort of just visiting people that were in a place that needed hope. And this was sort of the capsule that delivered it. And what a blessing for us. And for Zach, he got to hear all these people who loved this song. And it was just an incredible thing to witness.
Wow. Well, I know the subtitle, Andrew took the book away from me. My son Andrew's in here. Just how God answered a mom's small prayer in a big way. You know, what was your prayer?